Miami 24-14 over Ohio State. Cotton Bowl college football playoff quarterfinal. I got a ton of stuff to talk about here. I mean, it's right after the game. I think it's one of the most consequential outcomes we've seen in a long time. I know that sounds a little hyperbolic, but just walk with me here. Think about what was on the line. Obviously, you got your season on the line. Obviously, for Ohio State, you're trying to go back to back. Obviously, you've got a big point spread on this thing. Remember, consistently last week, I did like 37 different hits on this game. Consistently last week, I maintained that it was a weird dynamic because it was the game with the biggest point spread that I thought was the most intriguing. Out of all the four quarterfinal matchups, I thought this one was the most intriguing. And thankfully, my eyes didn't deceive me because what I thought I was seeing was an abnormally large point spread on a game where I thought the underdog, the 9.5 or 10.5 point underdog, had the offensive line edge, the defensive line edge, the quarterback experience edge. And now that we've watched the game, I think we went 3 for 3 on that. So I don't think the eyes were deceiving me. I also said earlier in the year, and this is where I'll just look dead in the camera because you clowns know who you are. I said earlier in the year, after seeing Miami in person, oh, by the way, and after seeing Ohio State in person. So by week 4, week 5, I'd seen both of them in person. I came home, did a show in Nashville Sunday night, and I said, there's not a team in the country that looks like Miami. And you'll never guess. Yeah, you know what? I don't want to be spiteful because I know people on the internet account for a very, very, very small sliver of an overall fan base. There were some Ohio State folks that ran their mouths incessantly about that, sort of took it personal, that I would dare suggest guys that you just saw on that field tonight dominate for 4 quarters actually look superior physically. Well, they are physically superior. And they were physically superior to Ohio State tonight because they're physically superior to anyone in the country. It's not like I was guessing my way through that. Like I'm standing there having watched both of them in person. Now, that didn't necessarily mean Miami was the better team. That's why they played the game tonight. It's just an added bonus that Miami ended up being the better team. So the eyes didn't deceive me, nor did the blueprint we laid out for how Miami would go about winning this thing. I was very conflicted on this game last week. I do want to remind you, in the interest of full disclosure, I had a very slight lean towards Ohio State on this one. I bet Miami, plus the points. Well, my favorite side prop in this thing, by the way, was over 72.5 rushing yards for Miami. That thing cashed, I think, in the first half. But remember last week, someone hit us up and they said, all right, well, if you're so high on Miami, how do you think they'll win this game? I said, well, that's not that difficult to figure out, I don't think. Um, Quite honestly, I think the question was born out of a place that believed something about Ohio State that wasn't there. Like Ohio State had been built up as some super team this year, and they weren't that. They're just a pretty good team. Not they're more than a pretty good team. They were a really good team, but they're mortal. Indiana proved that, and then Miami proved it again tonight. But all that you were going to have, and this is a loaded statement, but all you were going to have is sort of a repeat of the elements that were present in the Indiana game. Indiana got after Julian Sand. There was some crazy stat, like Julian Sand's been sacked 3 or 4 times all year, and then Indiana doubled that in a game. Well, Miami, I mean, I'm looking at it right here: 5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. He was under assault all night. To be honest, I give Julian Sand a ton of credit because that dude going 27 of 35 for 287 with what he had in his face all night is pretty miraculous. Now, it didn't come without a pick six, another interception to end the game. But all things considered, I don't know that there are other quarterbacks in the country that would have done better. To the point where I'll talk about it in a second. But Miami ended up taking a fastball from Ohio State in the second half and still came out on top. There's infinite amounts of things to be proud of for Miami, but they got after the quarterback all night, just like Indiana did against Julian Sayin in the Big Ten championship game. So that was part one. It was I don't think it was that difficult to see that coming, or at least the possibility of that. Then the second thing is they ran the ball. I was paying attention all week to the odds in like the props market over on FanDuel because I thought Miami would have fairly good success running the ball here. It's the ethos, it's the DNA, it's how the entire thing's been constructed down there. And I thought that what Ohio State had done against the run all year was very impressive, but there was nobody on the schedule that would have presented the problems that Miami was going to present. And it's not really so much a schematic problem. It's just you don't face bodies like that. Hardly anyone does. It's not like an Ohio State thing or a Big Ten thing. It's college football thing. So few places have athletes on the offensive line and then at tailback stacked up like that. So you just don't have an opportunity to see them very often. And when they do, it very much becomes about the players. It very much just becomes a matter of physics. And 37 carries for 153 yards, that's right at double what the odds market projected Miami to have. That's why I was so enthusiastic about betting over 72 and a half rushing yards for Miami. Like on a bad night, I thought they were going to get that. And as it turns out, they had a good night and they got that. But if you add those two elements, get after the quarterback relentlessly and run the ball pretty effectively, that was the key to putting Carson Beck in a fair situation.
Quick 5-second timeout. Check and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It keeps it free. We love you. All right, back to the show.
One of the things that drove me insane watching Miami last year, watching Cam Ward last year, is him being asked to do everything and him needing to score 40 because defense couldn't stop molasses in December. And that's its own thing that I'll talk about in a second. But when you play complementary football, when you play it the way it's supposed to be played, when they do it the way they've tried to build it down there, then you put a quarterback in a fair situation. So Carson Beck was put in a situation tonight where he's got a good ground game, got a good defense to lean on, and he proceeds to go 19 of 26. He didn't have a ton of passing yards. How many did he have? He didn't have a ton of passing yards. He didn't need it. I'll tell you what he was. He was a bulldog running the football. He had 7 carries for 23 yards. That's not something if I showed it to you blind this morning would have jumped off the page to you. Those were some of the most effective runs, some of the most game-changing runs of the evening to me. Was Carson Beck just sticking his nose, sticking his face in the fan, and converting, moving the chains, and that's in the midst, by the way, of a pretty effective Ohio State set of drives that was going on. So at any point, I mean, if you go three and out and you give them the ball back, you never know what's going to happen. And Carson Beck just tucked it, ran it, first down. And they ended up going 7 to 14 on third down. And there were some big third down conversions. There were a couple of times in that game where Ohio State feels like they've grabbed most of the momentum. It's hard to say you got all the momentum when Miami's got the lead, but they've grabbed a lot of the momentum. And then you just buy yourself another set of downs. You just buy yourself an opportunity to melt another 2 or 3 minutes of clock. So those were really the parameters that needed to be in place. This wasn't some monumental upset, man. It wasn't that. It never should have been presented that way. I thought it was so dumb the way people talked about this game leading up to it. Like Miami needs 38 different things to go right. No, they don't. They had some stuff go wrong for them. They turned the ball over in the red zone early in the game. They had a terrible overturned call go against them. I thought that this SEC crew, pretty notorious for throwing flags all year, just kind of walked in the building tonight deciding we're not throwing penalties on anything tonight. And I thought Miami got hurt by that a little bit. Not egregiously, but I mean, there were a couple of plays, a couple of PIs specifically that I thought were glaring. I don't care which conference your crew is from, they need to be calling it. So there was a lot more that could have gone right for Miami. So by no means was it like all the stars aligning. They just swung the sledgehammer and they hit Ohio State in the face enough times. But man, like Ohio State, Ryan Day, you can make the argument it's the best program in the country. If not, it's right there, the top three. Anyone can argue with me on that. I don't care. No one would argue with me that that's not a top three program, at the very least, in the country. There is just no easy way to cut the head off that snake. And they get down 14-0, they're dead in the water. And then they come out that second half, and they had a 12 play drive, I think right before the half, and that's the missed field goal. And then they come right back out 11 plays, 82 yards, touchdown, 10 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. And Jeremiah Smith, he was not absent tonight. Like you got the Jeremiah Smith experience, and they're boom, boom, boom. Julian saying is finding rhythm. Ryan Day as a play caller is finding rhythm. I'll tell you what it felt like to me for a second. It felt like the Bama OU game a week and a half ago, where Bama gets down 17-0. And then all of a sudden everything just clicks for them. And it's just boom, 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 one after the other. Almost, kind of like I equated it to pulling a rubber band back and then you let it go. Ohio State felt for a few minutes in this game like they were the rubber band. They got pulled back and then they got turned loose. But that's the benefit of building that lead, and that's the benefit of playing defense. You make them earn every yard. There are no easy, cheap touchdowns. Like I just told you, if Ohio State was going to score a touchdown tonight and they scored two of them, they had to go 10 plays and 11 plays, and it took time. So it wasn't easy. And at that point, if they score on you, you tip your cap to them because you're going to get yours, and they did. Miami did get theirs. But that game towards the end, it's got to be a beautiful thing from that Miami sideline. It's got to be a beautiful thing from your couch. It's got to be a beautiful thing in the stands because you're watching it and you've been listening to this guy who is your head coach, Mario Cristobal. He's been talking since the day he got there about the kind of team he wants to build. And he's been talking about the ethos. He's been talking about the DNA. He's been talking about the culture, the identity, all that. And there is no better feeling than a final drive being put in your lap. You got the lead. You got 6 minutes to go, and you need a few first downs, and you can kill it. And sure enough, Miami's got the ball with the lead with 6 minutes and change to go, and they go 10 plays, 70 yards, multiple big runs. It felt just like the latter portion of that Texas A&M game last week, and they leaned all day, and 35th, 36th, 37th carry, finally the dam breaks. Touchdown, less than a minute to go. Kane's up 10, and it's ball game because you're about to force an interception. And that feeling right there, I'll tell you, the only feeling that would have been better for Mario, knowing him, would have been taking knees inside the 10. Because that's when you look over and you let him know we could have made it worse. As it turns out, Miami did make it worse. So either way, it's pretty good. But let's talk about Mario Cristobal for just a second. I always want to be careful. I feel a lot of things when people talk about coaching in general. Most people have no clue what they're talking about. They can't because they can't see inside programs. Um, I've watched him since he got down there. Mario's been really good to us since he got to Miami. I've watched him build it. I've seen it from the inside. I've been fortunate enough and blessed enough to see it firsthand. You will never fully appreciate the task that they have undertaken down there and the job they've done. And I'm talking maybe even to some Miami fans. I know you appreciate it. I know you love it, but um, when you've got a history, like when you've got tradition, when you've got legendary seasons, when you got banners in the ceiling, when you got a ring of honor, when you have a past, it is so hard to get it out of the way so you can build the future. You think you're blessed by having a great tradition. And in some ways you are. In other ways, it could be an albatross around your neck because it warps people's view. And Mario's talked about this many times. He did it again tonight in the post game. Fact of the matter is, 99.9% of Miami's tradition was accomplished in another era, in an era that's long gone. And the problem is when you've done it one way, when you've had success one way, you try and copy and paste it. That's human nature. You're tempted to say, why don't we just do it the way we did? Well, the answer is because it wouldn't work now. It wouldn't work now because the environment, the climate has totally changed in college football. It's changed over the last 10 years, much less over the last 30 or 40 years. And Mario realized that. He realized that pretty immediately. I've sat there and had extended conversations with him about that. And he'd get real pissed off, actually, when people would say, how do you get the you back? And he's been pretty vocal about it this year, but I mean, this is something I've heard him say in private 3 or 4 years. It's just not about getting the you back. It's not about that at all, because that implies going back in time, grabbing something and bringing it to the here and now. That's not what we're doing. What we're going to do is we're going to have fun during, a cookout in June or July when we're sitting around with old friends and we're talking about the good old days. That's when we can talk about what the you was. But if you're going to focus on what it's going to be, it has nothing to do with bringing anything back. It has to do with saying, love it, forget it, and build it. And they've built it. And they've built it using all of the available avenues that are in place today and using all of the available talent mechanisms that are in place today and modern strength and conditioning, modern nutrition, modern everything, but a pretty advanced way of roster building as well. That's how you do it. But what the beauty in all of it is there are certain non-negotiables that are evergreen. If you can run the ball, if you can stop the run, if you can play physical, if you can play violent, if you can attack the quarterback, And if you can play good situational ball, you'll always win. Well, you'll always put yourself in position to win. And that stuff was just as true back then as it is now. And as long as the rules of this game stay the same, those will always be evergreen principles that you can build a winner around, which is what he's done and what some people told me he couldn't do. Some of the most ignorant conversation in the world of college football over the past 3 or 4 years has been centered around Mario Cristobal and what that guy cannot do and what he would not do. I've listened to it. I've had a little different viewpoint on it than most people because I've been able to look at it behind the scenes down there, and I've known what they're doing down there. I've been able to watch it. I don't think people can fully appreciate it, but there was never any doubt down there. When you have seasons end like they have, when you had the Georgia Tech game where they have the mismanaged clock, that was a point. If you were to freeze that moment in time, that's not that long ago, guys. Go back and look at what people were saying in the hours after that game. Go back and look at what people were saying earlier this year when they lost to SMU. That's their second loss of the season. I was there, I was on the field for that game. I thought the season may be over, to be honest with you, because at the very least, they took their fate out of their hands and put it in the hands of needing other teams to lose and the committee and whatnot. Now, thank goodness they got back in. But you remember what people were saying? You don't have to go back years, just go back a few months. Earlier this year, what were they saying? There's a bunch of can't do this, won't do that. Well, they're 4 quarters away from playing for a national championship in their own building. So, what was it he couldn't do? What was it that he wouldn't do? No, it was just he hadn't. They hadn't. They had not. It wasn't they cannot or they could not. It's just they had not yet. And they still haven't. But they've gone further than a lot of folks thought they would. And I'm just going to say this again. I I get to see a lot because I got the best job in the world. There aren't other places that I want to care. I want to contextualize this properly. There are other places that get after it. They get after it at Ohio State. They get after it at Georgia. They get after it at Texas. And there are big bodies flying around all over the place. There is something different when you go down to Miami, when you watch a practice at Miami. There's just something different. It's almost like to pull back from a previous era. There's like an unfiltered, more raw feel to it down there. There's a more gritty, in your face feel to it down there that in many ways has harnessed everything that is modern about college football, but it's also pushed away just a few things that are modern about college football and maintained an old school feel. It's kind of a perfect blend. And then you still got to go win. But it's no accident or coincidence when you watch them play the way they do. And it's terrifying if you're watching it happen to your team because you're like, man, why can't we go get these players? Well, it's not just the players. For example, they had some of these guys last year and defense sucked. So it's not just the players, it's getting the players. Absolutely, it is. And that's paramount. But then you got to put them in an atmosphere conducive to performing at the highest level. And that's why I will continue to say the acquisition of Corey Heatherman as defensive coordinator has been it may end up being the biggest coaching move of the previous offseason that anyone made because if it leads to you resurrecting a side of the football that puts your team and your program in position to play for a national championship, I don't know how much bigger it gets. Ryan Day deserves a ton of credit for going and hiring Matt Patricia. But Ohio State didn't struggle defensively last year. Miami was terrible defensively last year. And with some of the same guys, not all of them, but some of the same guys, here they are. They may have the best defense in the country. At its best, I don't know of any defense I would rather face less than Miami when they're playing at their best. So we are dangerously close. As I sit here and talk to you right now, it's late on New Year's Eve. We are dangerously close to Carson Beck versus Georgia for a trip to the national championship. I don't want to put cart before horse. Ole Miss could pull an upset, but I do know that Miami's going to be in that game. And now that Ohio State's been knocked out, the thing feels totally wide open to me. Maybe it always was, but in a lot of people's minds, Ohio State was the preemptive favorite, and it was them that had to get knocked out for you to really feel like, oh, it's anyone's game now. But man, we're about to head into New Year's Day. It feels like it's anyone's game right now. Ohio State's been knocked out. I also wonder, I mean, I won't have to wait long to find out, but you kind of wonder, and I made this point last week, the Big Ten. The Big Ten at the very top looked like the best wire to wire in the country this year. Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, etc. And maybe they were slash are. Like that was my way of thinking. But I always cautioned there's not a lot of out of conference referencing to be done here. Ohio State over Texas was the Big Ten's best out of conference win. And then after that, it was what Illinois over Duke. So everything they did was against each other. And sometimes that means you're fully authentic. The way you look is the way you are. But other times it means you may be ripe for being exposed. Those cards are in the deck, in other words. And so here we were. We were coming into the quarterfinals. We were going to have Ohio State against Miami. We're going to have Indiana against Bama. We're going to have Oregon against Texas Tech. So one of those is down. Let's see how the other two go tomorrow. But congrats, Mario Cristobal and Miami headed to the semifinals. That'll be in Glendale, Arizona in about a week. Now we just got to wait and find out who they're going to play.